Your ancestors' favorite radio station, and your favorite morning show host. Let's get back to Dominique DiPrima right now.
Right now, indeed. And we are being joined by the founder and executive director of Sanctuary Hope, the Sanctuary of Hope, helping youth and young adults to build self-reliance. More to that than meets the eye, for sure. Janet Denise Kelly is joining us this morning. Welcome.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Yeah, so we'll go through some hot topics and headlines. We'll get your take. I know you have insight that many of us don't have because just simply the work you do. Mm-hmm. But before we dive into that, talk to me about Sanctuary of Hope. You guys are really in the middle of a huge education campaign, but what is it that you do day to day?
So we are a nonprofit that provides youth development and human services for transitional age youth between the ages of 16 and 25 who are either child welfare involved, juvenile justice involved, homeless, or experiencing some form of housing or economic insecurity. We provide housing, life coaching, a variety of basic need support, education support, everything that is required to help a young person who may find him or her or theirselves in a crisis to get stable as quickly as possible.
Right, and that's an increasingly large number of young people, right?
Yes, it is an increasingly large number. On any given night here in Los Angeles, 5,000 youth experience homelessness on the streets, meaning that by definition of literal homelessness, meaning that they have no place to go, that they're actually on the streets. And we've seen that number over the past couple of years increase. Last year in the 2020 homeless youth count, it was a 19% increase, 26% for young families who are experiencing homelessness. And so it's something that we definitely want to shine a light on because we see that the numbers are rising, and because of COVID too, it's really impacting young people's stability.
Yeah, it's really kind of just the opposite of what you would think. Like, okay, there's a pandemic. Anyone who has any kind of way to get into a home or go home would do so. But that's kind of the opposite, right? Because young people are experiencing domestic violence, being trapped in the home when they don't get to go to school and have meals, and they're trapped in the home with abusive parents or people that are substance abusers, etc. Is that pretty much the picture you're seeing?
And even some had to leave home, especially those who are being cared for by elderly caregivers, meaning that either they were related by blood or not related by blood.
Right.
Many of those young people left so that their elderly caregivers could be taken care of and found themselves on the streets.
Wow, that's crazy, but it makes sense. I mean, they don't want to be the reason that elderly caregiver gets sick.
Absolutely.
And perishes, yeah. Well, many years ago, I was on the board of a homeless youth agency in Los Angeles, and I was shocked to learn how many flock here hoping that they can make it and then end up being exploited and abused by the adult film industry or any number of other folks who exploit them for all different kinds of purposes. I guess it makes sense, but it didn't really hit me until I was on the board of that agency that literally every night we have thousands of kids on the streets.
Yes, and that hasn't changed much at all, even though, there's great things about LA that young people flock to, but a lot of young people are leaving situations in which they don't feel safe. And they feel that coming to California, coming to Los Angeles is presents them the best opportunity to get employment, potentially find housing. But when you're young, you really don't know what the cost of housing is in Los Angeles, or even what the market is as it relates to employment. So that still exists. And one of the things that we do in that area is that even for young people who find themselves here and they want to relocate and return home, we assist them and help them with returning home and attempting to repair relationships with family members, whether it's their biological, extended family, or even finding new family in which they can connect with so that they don't have to be on the streets.
Well, certainly houselessness, unhoused people is a huge issue in the news, and I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about some of these stories, but also about what you think solutions ought to be from someone who is on the front line. I'd like to start with what's good. What's good today, Josephine Baker, as you know, she was an entertainer, a dancer, a singer, an actor who moved to Paris in the 1920s to get away from the racism of the United States. And she ended up becoming a massive sensation in Europe and all around the world. She was here as well, but then she did all kinds of things like acting as a spy, working against the Nazis while she was living in France and touring the world, adopting a bevy of children of many different ethnic backgrounds, calling them her rainbow tribe, which I love. And so now she is getting enshrined on the Pantheon in Paris. That's happening tomorrow. She's going to be only the 81st person ever buried inside that Pantheon, which is a monument from the 18th century, which is dedicated to honoring the French ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And so she's not getting dug up and reburied there, but what they're doing is they're putting up a memorial to her there as well. She will be the first American-born person ever. She'll be the first woman of color, and she'll be only the 6th woman to be there. So talk about some black girl magic.
That's black girl fantabulous.
Yeah. I love it. The French, of course, not known for their, well, I've never been to France, but certainly when I look at the history of the world, they are colonizers and have their own history of racial oppression. So you can imagine what it means for a black woman to rise to that level of their society. It is a big deal. And she's one of my sheroes, so really happy to see that. LA County is being sued for delaying food assistance to low-income families. It's a really weird story, but 2 local nonprofits are suing LA County. They're saying the welfare department, just as a matter of course, doesn't move food assistance applications in a timely manner for the lowest income residents of Los Angeles. So it was a lawsuit filed last week by the LA Community Action Network and Hunger Action Los Angeles, along with an applicant who says they faced long delays throughout the pandemic and says that the county's failure to comply with state law has put thousands of households in danger of going hungry every month. The county, of course, not giving a formal response. Do you have thoughts on this, Miss Janet Denise Kelly?
Well, I can't speak for the county, but I could tell you that, at the onset of COVID, especially as all of the government agencies were making changes and transitions, there were a lot of people, even our own young people, who experienced delays in applying for and even attempting to connect with someone who could facilitate their access to the CalFresh program, which primarily goes through them. And one of the things that we did was attended some of the training so that we could help do the applications online, but everyone doesn't have access.
Right.
Virtually to the system, and especially when you're talking about those who don't have not only the access to the digital resources, but during that time, a lot of things were shut down, which closed a lot of access.
Right. So going to the library, for example, to fill something out
Absolutely.
online becomes not an option at that point.
Absolutely.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I don't expect you to speak for the county or speak for all nonprofits, but I know that you speak for hungry kids.
Yes.
And many times what I hear from folks that do call me, and I have a lot of people that are unhoused that call either from a car or, if they're couch surfing or even on the streets because so many people have cell phones, is that the process of getting help, even when it exists, is often very fraught with delays, whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's, and I get that that's bureaucracy and that's just the way of the world in some ways, but there must be things we can do to make it more efficient. I want to say in asking you that question, like, I have been impressed to a degree throughout the pandemic with city, state, and local officials ramping up help for families who are in houses, who do, who are maybe on the verge of getting evicted or getting out, help to seniors, getting them fed when they couldn't leave their houses. I mean, I think we have seen examples of why who you elect matters. But on the other hand, these questions about the wheels turning so slowly predate the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. It's even one of the things that, most people don't know even about homelessness is that we have what's called the coordinated entry system. And as a part of this coordinated entry system, there's supposed to be this no wrong door, this easy access to getting connected to services, right? But as a part of this connection to services, there's what's called this VISPADAT, which is basically a prioritization tool. And this prioritization tool, depending on how you answer a question and how you score, right, will determine how you are prioritized for services, meaning whether you're going to get housing navigation support, if you're going to get...
Which means helping you find some place to live.
Helping you find some place to live. If you're going into interim housing, which is basically short-term housing, transitional housing, which is long-term, or into permanent housing. Now, one of the fallacies that's been happening as it relates to this, the tool is that Black people have been screening out at disproportionate numbers. And so what we've been finding is that as more Black people are being screened out, they're not being connected to the services that they need, especially in a time of crisis, based on a score.
Interesting. What the complaints I've heard about that, and I'm not an expert. We got some other stories to check out too, but is that people, like any form you fill out, that people don't know what they're supposed to say. But the biggest complaint that I hear is that if you're not addicted to drugs, you can't get housing.
You're not prioritized.
Which means you can't get housing because we actually don't have, at this point, enough housing, regardless of what the city council or everybody's saying about now when we close down homeless camps, we have to give everyone an offer of a place. But if we don't have enough places, that's mathematically impossible. So that's why we have a prioritization tool. Otherwise, we just round people up, figure out what they needed, and help them.
Right. Which also becomes very extremely important that you have to put a lot of resources on the front end. You have to stop people from falling into homelessness at the same rate that people are entering into the homeless system. Yeah,
that's a great point. It's one of the reasons I've been such a big advocate for things like, eviction assistance, eviction protection assistance, where people who are in danger of being evicted, which is going to be more and more in 2022 as, county and city protections and moratoriums start to fall away, that they end up in court with a representative rather than representing themselves.
Right.
Simple things like that, getting people rental assistance while they're still in a place rather than trying to get them into a place when they're already on the street, et cetera. It's ironic that people who are drug addicted would be prioritized because it seems, and don't get mad at me, all of my friends who are addicts, because I'm not saying that you're not worthy. I'm just saying that if we're looking at the odds of success, you would think you would want to get like families and people who are not necessarily dealing with addiction, but who seem more likely to be able to stay in a home once you give them a permanent home.
Right, and I think you have a whole lot of people who agree with you and who think that we need to relook at what harm reduction policies look like. Because even you have individuals who may have had histories of substance use, right? And they want or choose or have a choice to be in a sober environment. Well, our current process doesn't dictate that happens for that person, especially when that's a choice.
Understood. So now they're clean and sober, so they're not prioritized. Wow. Okay. That's, I don't know. If it was parenting, it would be a problem. Let me put it that way. I don't know what else to say about that. LA is finally, and this isn't Janet Denise Kelly speaking. This is Dominique DiPrima speaking. LA is finally going to start sending out these teams, outreach teams, to address nonviolent emergency calls for people experiencing homelessness. And what I was going to say that I said is not Janet Kelly, is that I feel like they're doing it because they just boosted the police budget and people are mad. So they're trying to make it like, yeah, but see, we are doing the policies that we supposedly stood for as supposedly progressive lawmakers. We see, look, we're sending out nonviolent teams to respond to people experiencing homelessness, even though we just boosted the police budget by 12% after promising we would not do so. So that being said, though, the Crisis and Incidence Response through Community-Led Engagement Program starts in December, in just a few days, and each team will be an outreach worker, a mental health clinician, or a licensed behavioral health clinician, and a community ambassador. They're supposed to be available 24/7 to respond to calls. It sounds like they're starting it out in Venice and Hollywood. Not so sure why it wouldn't be citywide, but maybe they're moving to that model. And they're also going to have them during the day, I guess, to areas that they're now considering high need. So those could be not just Venice and Hollywood. Thoughts on this?
Well, there has been in the past, I would say 3 years or more, a semblance of a multidisciplinary team that goes out, that engage the homeless that are there on the street. The difference is now that team in itself becomes the public safety response, right, to engaging our houseless neighbors.
Okay, so, well, I think it's a slippery slope, because what you're talking about is, I imagine there's a decision about whether that person is dangerous and whether we're going to send an armed response team or an unarmed response team. And, what is the criteria for that? I guess I have to talk to the mayor about that. The thing about it is, we know who is generally considered more dangerous. So that might not solve the problem that we have with unhoused Black people being killed by police. But I do think it's progress in the sense of, having, and you're right. In the past, we've had like officers who were supposed to be trained in this area, and then they'd go out with a mental health worker as a team. I would hope this would be different, just in the sense that the mental health practitioner would be the number one person making the decision about how to approach that situation. But
and probably Venice in itself too is considered a more safer community than any other.
And even though many times the data don't back that up, it's so funny you would say that, because that's one of my pet peeves. I mean, when I worked in Hollywood, I found out way back then, and it still holds true, that Hollywood is much more dangerous than South Central Los Angeles for anything, pertaining to violent crime, getting jacked, getting mugged, getting raped. The only thing that's more likely to happen to you in South LA, you might die. But as long as you don't die, you're much safer in South LA. And most people don't know that. And that's true. The most safest community in LA, Ladera Heights. Did you know that? We are going to continue unpacking headlines and hot topics with Janet Kelly, founder and executive director of Sanctuary of Hope, as we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
My partner in politics this morning, Janet Denise Kelly, founder and executive director of Sanctuary of Hope. You've been doing this for over a decade. I know those of you who run these nonprofits, especially dealing with unhoused people, which seems to be just such a, widespread problem, it's thankless work. So let me say thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
And
thank you.
I know it's tiring, so thank you for not getting tired, or at least keeping it pushing if you do when you do get tired. Tell me about what you have going on tomorrow.
So tomorrow we're closing out our Homeless Youth Awareness Month with a Woke Moments podcast on advancing racial equity in juvenile justice reform. So we're really spent this whole month of Homeless Youth Awareness Month really shining a light on those justice involved or justice impacted youth. We know that in the nation, over 1 million young people experience homelessness, right? Or 1 million people, 1 million youth actually have some form of police or juvenile justice or some form of justice encounter. And 400,000 of them will become homeless because of that. And it's so easy for young people to fall into the justice system. Just to give you a prime example, when there is an ordinance that says you can't publicly be on the street, or whether you're sleeping on the street, well, most young people, when they're unhoused, go to places where they're going to feel safe. And sometimes that may look like loitering, right? But they're actually in a place where they feel safe. And if they have a law enforcement encounter, which potentially can in a citation for a quality of life crime or loitering, many of them don't have an address for that citation to go to. They don't have the money to pay for that citation. And so they end up with either a bench warrant for a failure to appear, and then a high exorbitant citation that they can't even pay for because it's accrued all these fees and interest. And then if they get picked up, what do? They end up spending time in jail. We had that one instance with a young person who got picked up during the back then Columbus Day, now Indigenous Day holiday, for a loitering ticket that got up to $25,000 in order for him to exit out of the jail system, and he ended up staying there for almost 6 days.
Which then, changes the trajectory of their life too, because those are experiences that kids don't need to be having.
Absolutely. And it creates a domino effect. And the worst domino effect is you have an arrest record. Or the other domino effect is you spent time in jail, which makes it difficult to get housing, makes it difficult to get employment, all of those things that impact young people, or even for some of our young women and our young men who find themselves in domestic violence situations or sex trafficking situations where they have had a probation case, or even for them who have engaged in, I would say, survival behavior, which had resulted in them receiving some form of misdemeanor, or even in cases where we've had young people, because they were sleeping in their cars and they needed to protect themselves because either they were living in some places that were considered unsafe, violent, possession of a firearm. And so all of those things, it makes it so easy for young people to fall into the justice system, but we also have to create opportunities for them to exit without having incarceration as an option, or have them exit without having something on their record as an option.
Right.
And that's why that Care First model and the promotion of Measure J was extremely important.
So, yeah, and fighting for Measure J to be implemented, as many are doing now, in the way that voters saw it being implemented, which is for alternate resources that actually do keep our communities safe, such as mental health services, housing, education services, various kinds of support. We talk about, in your Homeless Youth Awareness Month, by the way, Woke Moments, they can get more info on your website.
Yes, if they visit our website at www.thesoh.org, they could click on the link and register to attend. It's going to be on the Hoover platform.
Okay, and this thesoh.org, that's Sanctuary of Hope's website for any additional kinds of things that you heard about on this conversation that you want to follow up on. Go to the SOH, as in sanctuaryofhope.org. So I guess the question is, how do you center the needs of African-American kids in all of this? Because what you're describing to me is a scenario which I actually have observed, right, over the years. So if kids, young people are loitering, we know who's more likely to get picked up for a loitering ticket. And you can, if young people are sleeping in their car, we know who's more likely to be seen as a threat and then searched. It's the same thing we just saw with the LA Times study around the bicycle violations, where the sheriff's department is overwhelmingly, in that case, 70% are Latino. Number 2, of course, Black people, and then other. How do you center the needs of Black children who are already disproportionately represented in the carceral system?
So one of the great things about Sanctuary of Hope is we're unapologetic about serving Black youth. I mean, it's something that's totally ingrained in the work that we do. From the time that a young person walks in the door, when we ask who you are, where you come from, what do you need? And oftentimes, many of these young people need people. They actually need people they could talk to, people who will be a sounding board, people who could provide them guidance, people who will connect them to any type of social network or social capital so that they could get themselves back on their feet.
Yeah. So the human resources, you find that successful? I mean, I guess the stereotype is young people, or really a lot of unsheltered people, that there's a revolving door cycle, kind of like in the prison system, where people fall out and fall in and fall out.
Yeah, but I mean, young people are young people. I mean, if you think of yourself at 18, 19, even 20, right? There's a lot of things that you may have not made wise decisions about.
Yeah.
But you've also needed the opportunity to redeem yourself and make better choices. And one of the worst things that the war on drugs did was change the labeling of kids, primarily Black kids, into delinquents, because that's what society sees. And even as our older or mature generation engages and thinks about our young people, even in our own communities, oftentimes it's not that outlook of, oh, this is a young person, they're maturing, they're growing up, but it's, oh, we're dealing with some delinquent behavior here.
Right, they're a menace.
What's wrong? Yeah, they're a mess. What's going on with these doggone kids? So it's that, and a lot of the work that we're trying to do is change that narrative, change that framework, because we all have to see the promise and possibilities in our young people, even when they make mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. That's another one of my little crusades. I believe that we, who Tavis Smiley would call chronologically gifted, those of us that are not kids anymore, have convenient selective amnesia. We only remember the good stuff we did. If my son was doing the stuff I did at his age, my head would explode.
Absolutely.
And yet, here we are. We're okay. Oh, y'all didn't have sex? Y'all didn't do drugs? Y'all didn't disobey? You didn't? If you didn't, then you have convenient selective amnesia. And I think if we as adults would get past that and really be honest about the things that we have done, and yet we turned out okay anyway. Sin was not invented by the latest generation, whatever that latest generation is. And no, we are not going to hell in a handbasket. That's my 2 cents. Janet Kelly, founder and executive director of Sanctuary of Hope, is our partner in politics. And we got more news and hot topics to unpack as we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580.
We're listening around the clock. And your time to be heard is right now. Welcome back to KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
So Janet Denise Kelly is the founder and executive director of Sanctuary of Hope. You guys do a lot of things, offering support and help to people young people who are trying to get off the streets or get out of abusive situations. And it's thesoh.org, thesoh.org, centering Black children, so important. One of the things that I've heard about unhoused people a lot on this show is people saying that they believe they're not getting COVID-19. And for some people, that is proof that coronavirus is a hoax, or maybe vaccines don't work, or, whatever conclusion they might draw from that.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it's absolutely false that there are unhoused people who are contracting COVID. They have contracted COVID. I could even tell you we've had an instance ourselves as an organization where we've had a young person that we took off the streets, house them, and they had COVID and end up infecting a number of people, a number of young people, even in our program, and they were forced to isolate.
Wow.
So COVID is real.
I mean, I think it's an interesting point, because how would we know? If you're not in them streets or in them tents, you probably wouldn't know. Sad story, 4 children and a woman shot to death inside a home in Lancaster. Was 10:30 last night, approximately. They are interviewing a man believed to be the father of those kids who turned himself in at Lancaster Station, but they're saying they're not sure whether or not he's a suspect. Reason I'm bringing it up, these kind of stories, I think are stories that make people feel scared, paranoid, and maybe draw conclusions that may or may not be true.
Mm-hmm. Which is also one of the reasons why it's very important, especially during the holiday season, that we check on everyone's mental well-being, everyone's mental wellness.
Yeah, it's a great point. Holiday season is a time of joy and giving. It can also be a time of loneliness, depression, extreme pressure, wishing you had someone who's not with you anymore, wishing you could buy things that you can't buy for your kids, or keep the lights on, or at least feed them. So many things. And whenever I hear these violent stories or horrifying stories, I always think that mental health has to be a consideration.
Yes, especially with the elevated stress that the holiday season brings.
Yep, and pandemic Santa is no joke. Or pandemic Hanukkah, or pandemic Kwanzaa, whatever the case may be. How can we help Sanctuary of Hope, the work that you're doing?
Well, one of the ways that we could help is we could help build strong communities that support and uplift our youth, because that's where we need to start with our young people. I mean, one of the things that I do, I live in South LA, and there are 6 youth that walk down my street that go to the bus stop in the morning to catch the bus. So when I'm taking my daughter to school, when those 6 youth are outside, I walk outside and I say, "Hey, hi you guys, how you doing?" And they'll look, and I'm like, "Are you going to give me a hi?" And they're like, "Hello." "Well, hello, Miss Kelly. It's good to see you this morning. Is that what you're expecting?" "Yes." And every time you walk down my street, I want you to say hello, and I'm going to engage you with a hello, because we are going to get to know each other, so that at any event or time, if you need something, or you find yourself in a crisis, or you need help, that I am your neighbor. I am here to uplift you. I am here to support you. And that's one of the greatest ways that we could start, because we need to start talking to young people.
Yep. It's so funny. I do that too. And I heard one kid mutter under his breath, "That's the friendly side of the street." I'm Dominique DiPrima. This is First Things First on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Unapologetically progressive radio. Black owned and operated from the heart of Leimert Park, USA. We're listening, and the convo continues right now.
Good morning. Yes, I'm talking to you. Welcome to the friendly side of the street. Janet Kelly has been our partner in politics this morning. She's the founder and executive director of Sanctuary of Hope, thesoh.org. Okay, I said, how can we help? You said build stronger communities. If we need help, or we want to volunteer, or donate? How do we access helping you or getting help from you?
Oh, great. So, of course, we love financial contributions. So the way that you could do that is to visit our website. There's links on how to donate to us directly. But also, one of the things that we do is that we collect goods, brand new goods, to assist our young people who are moving into apartments through our rapid rehousing program, who may be moving into apartments for the very first time into housing. And so we welcome groups who are willing to put together a welcome home basket of things that young people need to get a great start into their new apartment, whether it's a laundry basket with laundry soap, to blenders or toasters, towels, all of those things to get a young person off to a good start. That's one of the greatest ways that you could help us. And it's a need that we have currently right now, is for those welcome home baskets. And with every welcome home basket that's supported with the youth, we ask people to write an inspirational story or inspirational words that when that young person receives that basket and they open up and they read it, they know that that welcome home basket was given to them with care and love.
Okay, that's a good thing. And if somebody is a young person listening, or someone knows somebody younger that needs help, I just got a couple seconds here. What should they do?
So if you know someone who's experiencing some form of housing crisis or housing insecurity, or maybe they have some form of economic insecurity as well, please have them contact us. They could reach us via the website, or they can call us at 323-786-2413. And I'll repeat that number again, 323-786-2413. And we have some loving staff who are willing to assist.